so honored and so blessed to be able to have been invited to come and speak and to just share my heart on what God's been speaking to me about. And so it's really exciting. It's always a joy to get to talk about the Bible and to talk about Jesus because he's just so good. And so I want to start the beginning of this time saying that even if the heart of this message doesn't impact you super deeply, I hope that it invigorates an excitement for Scripture. I hope that it makes you excited and curious about what God has to say in his word, because it's got more for us than we could ever anticipate. And the way that God will move through the Bible for you in your personal time is going to be more poignant and more specific to you and even more impactful than anything I could do for you right here. But that being said, I think that this is a word for everyone. I think that we can all get something out of this. And I think God's going to do something if we give him the opportunity. With that, something as of late that I've been feeling personally that I've been craving is conviction and correction. And I don't think I could have always said that was something I ever wanted. I've had a long history of not being able to take that kind of thing and not knowing what to do with it and feeling like it's rejection. But it's something I've been able to embrace when asking God to do that for me, when it's asking God to refine me and to make me into who he's called me to be. It's a lot easier. It's easier to stomach that way, but it's still hard to take. But and of course I love and benefit from the encouragement and the motivation that we find in the Bible, all these positive images that we aspire to be like. But I also think that they serve more as a gentle reminder of what we can be and less of a reflection of where we actually are. You know, oftentimes it's the negative images in the Bible. It's those stories about mistakes and prophetic critique, actually, that reveal what our problem is. And oftentimes the ways that we choose to address it, whether it ends up going well or, in this case, not going well. So I want to talk about one of the most hard-hitting stories of conviction that you're going to find in the Bible, and that is the golden calf in Exodus 32. This is not a fun story to talk about. It's a really good story to talk about, though. And so, start with some context, because we need that for the Bible. Egypt and the children of Israel have had a complicated relationship throughout the entire Bible. I mean, all the way Genesis to Revelation, you're going to find these patterns because the Bible's so beautifully constructed. It's divinely constructed. And I could go all the way back and discuss Noah and his sons, Ham and Shem, and do that whole thing. But you are nice people, and I'm not going to do that to you at this particular moment. But we will go back to Abraham, our favorite father. He went into Egypt during a famine, and he lied about the identity of his wife. He was given livestock and Egyptian slaves in her stead. But luckily, God pulled through, as he always does, doesn't he? And he sent plagues on Pharaoh. Isn't that interesting? And he brought back Sarah so that she could fulfill the promise that God had given Abraham. But still, things didn't go well. One of the Egyptian slaves that Abraham actually got in Egypt became pregnant with his son Ishmael. And Hagar was oppressed by Sarah because Sarah was supposed to be the one that got pregnant, and then she's cast out. So we already have like a slavery, oppression, Egypt, Israel kind of dynamic going on. And then later on, we've got Jacob and his 70 family members going down into Egypt when Joseph is in leadership. It's all very interesting. It's already kind of complex, and it sets us up for Exodus, actually. You know, Moses, he's been primed after so many excuses. We've never done that. To partner with God and Aaron in setting the Israelites free from slavery and oppression. And after the plagues, and after asking and asking and asking, and a visit from the angel of death, scary times, and the people that weren't passed over, Pharaoh finally agrees to let God's people go. And it's a relief. Again, God pulls through, as he does. But after 400 years, they were pretty settled in Egypt, and then all of a sudden, they have to move out. They have to evacuate, essentially, because Pharaoh's mad. His son is dead. Like, this is real stuff. And they're coming out of this violent and tragic, heartbreaking era for not just them in their own individual lives. There's the history of their people, and they carry that with them. And I'm sure a lot of us that are watching are in California. I'm from California. And we've had to evacuate for things like fires and earthquakes. And, so it's not so far removed from me to have a moment where you have to decide, what are the things that I can't live without? And what are the things I need to continue on in my life, And it's a hard choice, You're just like sifting through your things and deciding what really matters to you. It's hard. And how do you prepare for a journey that you know nothing about? How do you prepare for something where you don't know what you're going to need? It's hard to make these choices. We don't know what we're going to want one day. And we don't know what we can do without until we're without it, right? In regards to what they actually brought with them, Exodus 12:35-36 says, "The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold and jewelry and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what was asked." God's favor. Isn't that funny that because when I first read this story, I thought that they just took their own. They took their own gold and silver and stuff, which they probably might have. But the fact that they were given so much favor by God and that it was given to them by the very people that were oppressing them and sending them out shows just how good God is and how he's really going to give us what we need to bring out of a season. And not only that, but these are it's gold and silver and stuff. It's just as precious then as it was now, actually probably more now because it's more rare and stuff. But they were given substance of value and of quality to carry out of their season of hardship. And when we leave seasons of life that are challenging and that hurt us, we need God's voice and we need God's discernment. And even his favor, actually, to determine what needs to be left behind and what things we need to take with us. Because a lot of times we go to these extremes. On a lot of fronts we go to extremes. But here, if we do a clean break, if we suppress things like nothing bad even happened, we're not, we're just going to forget it ever happened and let it go. So often we prevent effective forgiveness. We stifle our ability to grow, and it leaves us without materials for what God wants to build with us in the next season. It leaves us empty-handed, But then if we take everything from a season, we take every emotion, we take every, moment we were angry, all of our resentment, a certain practice, a certain behavior, or a certain mindset, all these things that come out of a place of hurt, we can leave that place with extra problems that would have been resolved if we would have just left it behind. If we would have just decided that that's not for us. We get weighed down. So our journey is longer, harder, and we're going to have to deal with it eventually. Eventually, you're going to have to put it down. We need discernment, and we need favor. We need God to tell us what's for us and what's not for us. But from here, God keeps doing his thing. Again, as he does, how many times won't he do it? And from signs to wonders to miracles, he's carrying them through the desert right now. He parts the Red Sea, he drops food out of the sky, he brings water from a rock, and he gives them the 10 Commandments, and they're at the foot of Mount Sinai. Exodus 32:1-4 says, here's where we get to the golden calf part. It's gonna suck, and it's gonna be so good for us, right? When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt," like it wasn't God that brought them out of Egypt, "we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, your daughters are wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. And then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." An idol. An idol. When just a few chapters ago, actually in Exodus 20, God said, "You shall not make yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below." But that's the exact thing that they did. They made something actually so far beneath God. They made an animal. It's not even like the image of a person where we're actually made in God's image. Something so far beneath who God is. And it's obvious that it was because it's a fallback. When I'm scared and when I'm struggling or I'm even just impatient because they were just waiting for Moses to come down the mountain, so often we go into our fallback, a fallback to an old behavior, and they fail to live up to this covenant and the challenge they've literally just been presented with. Honestly, idolatry was an ancient Egyptian MO. That was how things were. You know, that was just a basic practice, and it's something that they lived around for so long that it's no wonder that they kind of absorbed it, you know? And so we can understand how we get there, because how far from that are we actually, you know? How far from the fallback of making other priorities are we? You know, it's a hard one, you know? It's one that Israel struggled with for a very long time in the Bible. Not even just like idolatry, this specific one. There are golden calves at least all the way up to like Amos, you know? And it's something that we still carry too. What are my other priorities? Like maybe my idol isn't made out of stone, and maybe it's not made out of gold, but it's made out of all these things that I put before God that are so much lesser than, like a cow compared to God. It's my homework compared to God, which I'm still going to do it, obviously. I'm still going to do it. But God's so much higher. And we have to know that in our unhealthiness and when we are presented with challenges, our bad behaviors that we didn't surrender to God, that we didn't sacrifice to Him, are going to rear their ugly head. And if we don't for reals deal with it, then it's going to follow us. And we're not called to struggle continually like that. We're called into redemption and we're called into priesthood. But speaking of priesthood, our boy Aaron, he is struggling in this story. Hardcore. He was called to be Moses' mouthpiece. It actually says in Exodus 4:14 through 16, after Moses is like, oh, I can't talk. But he obviously can. Deuteronomy talks the whole time and he kills it. But he was a little insecure, I think. It says, then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well, and he's already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I will help both of you speak, and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. I think we can all agree that if God said Aaron could speak well and had a gift, then he just had it. The problem is that he failed to speak, right? He was there, and the people asked him. They said, make a golden calf. It's not like they just did it themselves. He let them do it because he didn't want to raise his voice when disobedience and when injustice occurred. And he let his gift in this moment go to waste when his accountability, Moses, was gone. Just like God was at the top of Mount Sinai with Moses, and the people were without God. And they decided that they could go and make an idol. And why would Aaron do that when he knew full well it was disobedient? You know, he'd seen the 10 Commandments. He knew that it was wrong. It seems stupid. It seems dumb. In fact, the whole situation reads as ridiculous. You know, it reads as, why would they ever do that? And I think it's intentional, because everything in the Bible is intentional. You read this and you look up and you say, wow, Aaron's stupid. He couldn't follow God's simple request and totally fell to peer pressure, as if I've never done that. These people are dumb and they should have known better. But then you look up in the mirror and then you look down at the page and you realize that it's just you. Like, it's just me. I mean, isn't it everyone, though? Like, how often have I sacrificed obedience for someone's opinion? How often have I sacrificed righteousness for my popularity or to escape conflict? Because that's, I think, what he was doing. I've done it often. Really often, more often than I care to talk about with you. And Aaron had a God-ordained calling to something that's speaking and that's priesthood, but he let it go to waste in this defining moment for Israel's history for something as fleeting as public opinion, which we know changes fast. It can change in an instant. It's not worth it to give up a life that's after Jesus, after God at this point. They didn't know Jesus yet. Jesus was coming for him. And it happens quickly. It happens so fast that before you know it, there's an idol made to your own life erected right before your eyes. It's the idol that we've made to our own comfort, in our own image, in our own platform. And it stands so high above us that we don't even know how it got there. I mean, Aaron, when Moses comes down the mountain, Aaron's like, I don't know, just like came out. And we feel like that too. I don't know how it happened, Jesus. I don't know how I haven't read my Bible in 6 months. It just happened like that. It's that easy. Because that kind of idol is always going to pose a satisfaction that's temporary. And at its core, it's counterfeit, you know? God's glory was in the form of like a for reals thundering cloud above this mountain that they could see at the very moment that they were taking off their earrings and stuff and making this calf. Like, God was there. It hurt his feelings to see them reduce his love and his power and his desire to rescue them into something idle, into something cold, and into something fake. He was angry. And in fact, I think any of us would be too if we made a promise with someone and then we enthusiastically turned around and went back on it. You know? I'd be mad. I wouldn't smite them like God says he's going to do. But he doesn't even do that. He's that good, right? You know, and then there's this super awesome story here about intercessory prayer where Moses stands in the gap for his sinful people and God changes his mind that he's not going to smite them. Thank God. And that I want to talk about that whole story, but there's more to get to. There's so much stuff. And God forgives his people anyway. He makes another covenant with them, like it feels like probably days afterwards. I mean, it's so fast that they went back on this. But God's mercies are new every day, aren't they? They were new the next minute. That's how God rolls. He's that kind of guy. And that kind of love proves that we're never too far gone, actually. You know? God has been a redeemer long before Jesus died on the cross for our sins. And all the way, actually, since Genesis 3, he was the author of the backup plan. You know, when things don't work out, how he's going to work things out for good as Genesis ends. His intention for their gold and for their silver and their luxury items was to make the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle. It had a greater purpose. You know, that's why he gave them favor with the Egyptians in that moment, to get all these materials to do something that was going to bring them what they were actually looking for. Because they wanted to worship. They got really mixed up. But he wanted to create a place where they could come into his presence, and then they chose something that was so far beneath his presence that they had used up what God had given them and wasted it. You know? Without discernment and without obedience and without trust in God's favor, we rest in old problems like that. And we don't produce good fruit, and we live in a reality that's actually second best to God's intention. You know, it might look good to you. It might look sparkly and gold and wonderful, and it might be okay. You know what? It might be okay for you. Idolatry is not okay, but I don't know what it is for us, you know? But we're called to God's best, so why would we settle for a golden calf when there's a tabernacle out there for us to build? You know? It seems dumb, yet again. What's one of my favorite things about how God made us is that we are malleable and we are moldable. We are impressionable, and we're ever changing if we allow ourselves to be humbled and not stubborn and frozen in our pride. You know, he melted down their golden calf and allowed them to re-offer up their gold for the construction of the tabernacle. Because that was even before they sinned like this, Moses knew about the tabernacle. And the whole point is that they were supposed to offer up their gold. Not just that it was going to be taken, that they were supposed to contribute to this beautiful thing God wanted to place among them. He wanted to place right in the middle of them, right? And I want God to melt down the idols that I've made. I want to reoffer all of the gifts that he's given me that I've offered up to wrong things, to counterfeits. I really just want to reoffer it to him. When I think about my life, I want him to tear down the altar that I've built to myself. You know? It's so easy to live a life for us and to live a life for me when we're called to something bigger than that. You are not the biggest project that you're ever going to work on. You know? We're a part of God's project. And I think he's willing to do that for all of us. And I'm not always going to have discernment or wisdom. When I'm walking out of that season, when I'm walking out of that Egypt place for me, I'm not always going to get it right. And you're not always going to get it right. That's really hard. You know, the only person to get it right was Jesus. We're going to fail on the discernment and the wisdom level sometimes. And I'm oftentimes not going to bring the right material out of a hard season of my life. And I'm oftentimes going to take the wrong thing. And I'm going to realize that it's very heavy. But God still paves a way for us when we mess that up. Because that's not the only option. God will turn it around for good. He's offered us a refining fire, you know? And we can burn off the old. And we can burn off what's wrong. And we can burn off what's sinful. And we can weld back together what's broken. And we can be left as bare materials. And we can be left raw. And as open vessels that are available for God's will and God's purpose. We just have to be willing to endure that. You know, that's not a fun time. I'm sure you were alive for 2020, weren't you? Like, that's a refining fire, you know? And whether you asked for it or not, you have the option of if you're going to leave that as an open vessel, as a raw material for God's temple and God's purpose and God's house, or if you're just going to get burnt up and left in the pile. He doesn't want that for you. He's not trying to scorch you and smite you. That's not God's heart. He wants to make you into something so beautiful. We just have to be willing to endure that after we screw up. And we have to choose obedience. And we have to choose reverence. Even when it's convicting. And even when it hurts. We have to make ourselves a habitat for him. And it's not going to be an easy time. But isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth it to just choose God every single day and go through that, then have to tear down a million idols all the time? That's exhausting. And serving God's exhausting in a different way. That's fulfillment. And that's what we're here for, aren't we? So as we kind of close out this time, I want to invite us to pray over this coming year. I mean, I don't want to be the person that's all about 2020 sucked and 2021 is going to be so great. But I do feel like there is always a place for a mindset shift. Isn't there? Like we control what season we're in. We don't control our circumstances. But we control how we address that. And I'm going to address it by saying I missed some opportunities for discernment, and I missed some opportunities for wisdom in my last year. And I'm going to choose refining fire for this year. And I'm going to choose to come out better and to make myself a temple for God to dwell in. And so I want to consider what I learned. I want to consider what I endured, and then make a choice about how I'm going to live. And am I bringing the materials needed to build with God this next year? And am I leaving behind destructive behavior that doesn't honor God? First and foremost, that's what I'm called to do. Where are my priorities? And so, this last minute or so, I'm just going to pray for all of us watching this, that maybe we can be encouraged that it's going to be worth it every single time to become a place where God lives. That's where I want to live. So, God, I want to thank you so much for this story thank you that you've shown it to us and you've revealed that it's really our problem. We're not any further above the mistakes of your chosen people. And I pray that you give us wisdom and discernment, and that when we miss the mark, that we can trust your favor. We can trust that refining fire isn't just going to burn us up, that it's going to leave us so clean. It's going to leave us as people that you can use for your purpose and for your will, God. We just want to honor you, and we don't want to be disobedient. We don't want to let our fear and our impatience cause us to fall back into old behaviors, because you've promised us new things, and you've promised to redeem every single part of our being, God. You're just that good. I thank you for this testimony that we get to have, that you brought them up out of Egypt, and you'll bring us up out of our Egypt. You'll bring us up out of wherever we are, where we're struggling, and you will send us out to do bigger, better things on our way to a promised land. If we can just bring ourselves to listen. We just want to listen to you, God. Thank you so much, Jesus. You never fail to show up for us. Amen. All right. Thank you so much. I hope that meant something to you, at the very least, that you go and read it for yourself. There's all kinds of things you can pull out of the story, as well as anywhere in the Bible, and I hope that you feel encouraged, because there's so much for us to do. There's so much for us to be, and God just wants to live in that little house with you. So, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.